Hello, my name is Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Thanks for joining me for this IPA talk with me, which we tend to do at this time every year when it's in legislative session. We've got Brian Schwartz, Deputy Executive Director and General Counsel, along with Allison Maley, Government Public Relations Director. We are in the middle of spring legislative session, and it's a good time to, especially now that the legislators are on their spring break, for a couple of weeks for us to step back, regroup, and share what's going on. So, hi, Brian. Hi, Allison. How are you?
Good. Fine, thanks.
Excellent. Good. Today's recording, just so we know, is April 6th. And I think, Brian, as of right now, the Cardinals are maybe in the lead in the Central Division, right? So let's make sure we address what's maybe most important in all of
the most important issues, of course. Yes.
That's right. That's right. All right. We digress. All right, Allison, it's been a busy session so far, a lot going on. Can you just kind of give us a quick recap, and then we'll get into a couple of bills specifically?
Sure. Yeah, so we're really at the halfway point right now. So the legislature is on a 2-week spring break to account for Easter, Passover. Of course, we had consolidated elections this week, city elections all over the state, library boards, school boards, you name it. So they're on a 2-week break. And so really, for the most part, most bills that have started in their original chamber have passed that original chamber. And so when they return, they'll be moving to the opposite chamber. So House bills will be in the Senate and vice versa. So yeah, it's been a busy session so far. Really the first normal session we've had since 2019, really. So back to in-person committee hearings, in-person, meetings around the Capitol, kind of back to normal for the most part. So a lot of new members, we had a lot of new members come in a couple of years ago that have really never experienced a real session, to be honest, and a lot of new members since. So a bit of a learning curve for some folks, I think, and just they're getting that big drink from the fire hose as well. But a lot of legislation that was filed in January and February when we first started, a lot of that has kind of, it's filtered out and tapered off at this point. But we do have some bills that we're still monitoring and engaged on for the second half of the session.
And the goal is to wrap up by middle of May or so, correct?
Yeah, May 19th. So the plan, we adjourned quite a bit earlier last year, April 8th, I think, into the early hours of April 9th. But the plan is to stick around until May 19th instead of going the full month of May like we used to do. So we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Which is still aggressive, not as aggressive as last year, but will be nice to see things be done here by the middle of May. So hopefully we're able to hit that target. All right, so we do have several bills to cover, and because there are so many, Allison, you and Brian are going to kind of toggle back and forth a little bit with regards to this legislation. So the first thing we want to do is we want to talk about some teacher shortage related bills. So Brian, you want to kick us off with that?
Sure. So the General Assembly has been very helpful, the General Assembly and Governor, and kind of putting some pretty substantive band-aids on this, the teacher shortage and the staffing shortages, and a couple of more that are being proposed. In particular, Senate Bill 2236 makes the short-term sub-license permanent, and I think this has been helpful to a lot of school districts. It also removes the 15-day limit on that short-term sub-license in cases where the governor has declared a public health emergency like COVID. Otherwise, it's a maximum of 5 days for any one teacher that an individual on a short-term sub-license can sub into that classroom. And then that bill also, Bill 2236, waives some of the state application fees, mainly for sub-licenses, short-term sub-licenses, and then educator licenses with stipulations. So I think schools and districts will find that bill very helpful if it does pass, and kind of filling those gaps in the teacher shortage and the sub shortage.
Yeah, there's rarely still a time goes by when I'm talking with school leaders when you ask, how many classrooms were you subbing in this week? And rarely is the answer 0.
Yeah, a lot of hands go up when you ask that question.
Yeah, for sure. Well, just speaking of filling classrooms, Allison, a related bill and something that basically is a continuation that we've had here for a while, but because there's a sunset clause in previous legislation, we have to kind of deal with this session by session, is, making sure that retirees can work up to 120 days. So what do we got going on with that right now?
That's right. So Senate Bill 1468 restores that 120 days. I believe it's 600 hours in a school year for retirees to come back and work without impacting their pension. That restores that initiative until 2026. So June 1st, 2026. So it takes us through another couple of school years at least. But yeah, that had expired already before the beginning of the school year. So it's nice to kind of have that restored at some point, hopefully soon.
So, one of the questions I get sometimes related to retirees working, they ask the questions, well, why can't we make it 150 days or 180 days or whatever? But if I remember in conversations that the three of us have had, there are some things that we do have to be careful of related so that we don't put, retirement in risk with relationship to Social Security and all of that. So there's kind of a sweet spot that we kind of have to hit, maximizing the number of days available, but also making sure that we don't go too far with regards to federal guidance. Am I correct on that?
Right. Yeah, there are some prohibitions against working full time in an industry which you're getting a pension in. So we're pushing pretty close up against that with 120 days. But so far the feds haven't intervened, so we're just kind of holding our breath and maybe pushing our luck a little bit.
Well, possibly, but they, I think, recognize too that we've got to have people in classrooms to teach these kids. So this is obviously pretty important. All right, so those are some teacher shortage related items. Let's move on to some curricular stuff. I know each of you have a bill to talk about, so who'd like to go first?
Go ahead, Allison.
Oh, sure. So I will take on full day kindergarten. And I know a lot of our members have heard a little bit about this on IPA Connect and probably from other organizations as well. So House Bill 2396 would essentially implement full day kindergarten beginning with the 27-28 school year. Prior to that, there is language in the bill to create a task force of sorts to kind of figure out what are the capacity needs, what are the financial needs, what are the staffing needs in order to meet that deadline. Because I think, I don't think that there's anyone out there or any district out there that doesn't want to do this. And I think all educators understand the benefits of having a full day kindergarten program and how that sets kids up for success later on. But for a lot of districts, it's a matter of space. I'm sure we're speaking to a lot of folks out there that already have those spatial issues. Of course, staffing is a problem. We've talked about the grade band endorsements and how a lot of people that want to get into elementary schools end up, seeking out that 1 through 6 endorsement for more flexibility, and maybe not as many people seeking out the pre-K to 2 endorsement. So
we talked to the state superintendent and the ISB team yesterday about that during our biannual advisory meeting, with Dr. Sanders.
So a lot more things I think need to fall into place before we can say statewide, this is the requirement. So there is an effort to do that prior to the implementation date. IPA has taken the stance, as well as some of our other management organizations, that we are certainly not opposed to full day kindergarten, but we're kind of putting the cart before the horse until we really know what kind of financial considerations need to happen. Building capital needs are out there. I know there's a lot of districts that have tried to go through referendum to be able to provide full day kindergarten, and they have not passed. So recently, that kind of voter support is really difficult. So I think we would prefer that study go forward first before the mandate, but that's how the bill is drafted currently.
Yeah. Those referendums have happened even as of like this last November, right? That they were trying to get that done. I would say with the space issues, I believe about 80% of school districts across the state currently offer full day kindergarten, correct? I think that's the number.
I think that sounds well, and I think that's part of the study is determining. I know ISB has sort of a count on that, and how accurate that is currently, I'm not quite sure, but I think that's kind of the point of taking a deeper dive into that data.
Well, and with regards to the space needs, I think we've got probably some elementary districts out there that just within the space where their schools are, they may not have a footprint large enough to be able to even add on. So there could be some pretty significant implications for them. So this will be interesting to see how it goes, and hopefully we're able to get to a little more palatable resolution with regards to that. Thanks for that. Brian, what else we got going on in the curricular space?
So shifting from kindergarten to the other end of the K-12 educational perspective, they screw up so fast. They're already graduating high school. We've had a lot of bills and a lot of new laws over the years that change the high school graduation requirements, and we've been very concerned about these. All of these bills and all these new laws are very well intentioned. However, there are only so many courses and so many requirements that you can pack into a kid's 4-year high school experience and have them graduate in that 4-year time period. So as many of you know, starting with the 27-28 school year, kids are going to have 2 years of foreign language in order to graduate high school. And House Bill 1375, if implemented in its current form, would require kids in 11th and 12th grade to have one full semester standalone class of finance, personal finance, in order to graduate. So Allison has been working very diligently on this bill and has the State Board of Education. Allison, can you talk about a little bit how that might change and it might be incorporated into the current consumer ed requirements?
Yeah, so I think I put this in a recent update to the membership about fixing it in the Senate or fixing it in the House. So with this expedited timeline of getting bills passed out of the first chamber, we just didn't quite have enough time to make the amendments on this bill before it had to pass the House. So in the Senate, the plan is to amend the bill to include financial education as part of the consumer education curriculum, to still keep it as flexible as possible at any point during the high school between grades 9 and 12, and incorporated in other classes as well. But basically any of that content that's in the bill that's not currently covered in the consumer education program would be added to that. So without the list in front of me, I can't pull it all up, but there is some content that I think is maybe not necessarily addressed currently that we would be adding to that. But again, keeping, not having a standalone course, not having a semester-long course, none of those parameters, but keeping the parameters that we have right now for consumer ed.
Yeah, so this is a topic that we're going to have to really be very diligent on, because again, all of these bills are well intentioned to give kids experiences in their high school level, but when we make them mandatory rather than permissive, it just, number one, like I said previously, makes it hard to graduate kids in 4 years. And then number two, one of the things I've been concerned and vocal about is maybe takes away from our CTE programs by pushing kids into courses that they may not need for their future.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, there's a real I guess, suppression of agency for kids to be able to have a little more choice in terms of the classes that they're interested in, would like to take. I don't think anybody argues with the importance of financial literacy. We have mechanisms for doing some of that and teaching some of that now within the requirements that kids have. So I think it's just a matter of assessing those things and figuring out from there. Okay, so just to keep us moving along here a little bit, we got a kind of a smorgasbord of a few other bills we want to be sure to cover. And then also I'd be remiss, since we're talking about legislation, not to bring up a couple of the tools, Allison, that you have implemented and deployed here for our members to be able to really keep up to speed in real time of legislation that is important to them. So the first one, let's go with Senate Bill 1872, which is a bill that is intended to reduce the length of time it takes for a teacher to get to tenure. So who's got that one?
Sure, I've got that one. So one of the bills that's moving right along is Senate Bill 1872, which would reduce regular tenure from 4 years to 3 years and expedited tenure from 3 years to 2 years. Tenure portability would remain the same at 2 years. So if this bill goes into law, we're going to have to be very careful in making sure when we know when teachers' tenure dates are, because you could theoretically hire 3 teachers on the same day and they could all have different tenure dates. So something that principals especially will need to make sure that they are aware of.
And that's one that we have an action alert on our website. So if you go to advocate or advocate, I think it is the tab at the top of our website,
Yep.
You can get to our policy and action center. We've been opposed to the bill just because we feel like the 4 years is sufficient time for our school leaders to make that kind of a decision, which, can be a career-long decision to retain a teacher with tenure, and then with the portability to take it to another district as well. So we've been, looking at that and discussing that with the sponsor and other advocates. There's also a study happening currently with the PIAC committee at the state board about the evaluation system overall. And, it's 10 years out. And so is it time to make some changes? Is it time to make some of those kinds of the same decisions? But I think we'd prefer to see that kind of go to its end before really making some sweeping decisions on tenure and evaluation processes.
Yeah, I believe there's some more wisdom in that just because we are able to take it more from a systemic approach. And I know one of the arguments for this legislation has been that its intention is to help stabilize the teaching profession. I disagree with that because I think it actually, causes for the opposite, where you may have a school leader that's working closely with the teacher, and if they had a little more time before they would make the decision whether to grant tenure or not for that individual, they might give them more of a chance. But if they're boxed in, if school leaders are boxed in to have to, offer tenure sooner, they may not be willing to retain people like they would before. So remains to be seen, but please, let your voice be heard, get in there, utilize the action alerts. We'll share that in just a moment here to let you know where you can go find that. All right, let's move to HB 3425, which I think has to do with bullying notification. Allison?
Yeah, so this really is another bill sponsored by a new legislator, Representative Croak, in the city area, I believe. So she is asking that when a administrator or whoever receives a bullying report, that they notify any of the students that are involved in that situation, any of the students that would be involved in that incident, notify their parents or guardians rather, within 24 hours. So, we've had a lot of discussions on this with her, and we've suggested some alternate language that, again, I think if we are successful, we can perhaps get that amended in the Senate to require that kind of a notification within one school business day. Just because, you guys aren't on call 24/7. And I think the idea behind it is again, laudable. I think she's really concerned about students being bullied and cyberbullying and the tragedies that can occur from that. But I think also that, we need to make sure that students and parents are well aware of other avenues to report that sort of thing. If their student really is having things like suicidal ideations and things of that sort, Safe to Help is a great resource, and that notifies school officials and law enforcement really more quickly, even than just kind of calling the school and notifying someone there. Or of course, calling 911 if your student or yourself is really in that kind of a crisis state. That's probably the more appropriate approach to take than having school officials, take that time to notify everyone involved. So again, we're hoping to make that, make some more changes perhaps in the Senate, but we'll keep you posted.
Yeah, theoretically, Allison, the way the bill's written now, I guess not theoretically, in reality, if an administrator were to find out about a bullying incident on a Friday night at 10 p.m., they would have 24 hours to notify the parents, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, well, no doubt want to do everything possible to keep kids safe, but we do have to have considerations for what can reasonably be done for our school leaders and in terms of what the expectations are for them as well. We think about, their work life, balance, all of that stuff too. So there's no doubt if we had an issue of true safety and concern with that people would act quickly. But there's just some nuance in here that I'm not sure is being dealt with that we need to have some consideration for. All right, so let's wrap up our review of some of the more pertinent information or bills that have been watching here during session. There are definitely some others, but Allison, this is legislation that you've worked hard on for, I think, probably since the moment you started here, but it sure feels that way. but
Yeah.
actually have this work in bill form and been working gratefully with Representative Mussman on it, and that is trying to streamline state mandated trainings, because I think Illinois might be way out front of all states across the country. If not, we got to be right close to the top of state mandated training requirements for educators, because we're up around 24, I think, at this point in time. So,
Oh,
so
yeah.
what we got going on with this?
Easily. So really what we've tried to do is not just streamline the trainings, but also put them on maybe a more manageable schedule for administrators and educators statewide. I think in our dreams, we would love to have this attached to the licensure cycle. I think we're very much exploring putting all of the trainings on a 5-year cycle to kind of match that. But I think maybe eventually our hope would be that as administrators and educators and complete these trainings, they can, check a box on their LS account, and then it shows up there for them to take that with them to other districts or other school buildings. And it's all in one place. And districts also would not have to keep track of that on their own. They could kind of just look up the folks in their building and make sure that they've completed those trainings. So that's one piece of it is changing the frequency of the trainings. And then the other piece would be we've looked at, even going back to looking at transcripts when some of these trainings were passed into law and kind of trying to get a feel for and a handle for what was the impetus behind those trainings. So trying to streamline those as much as possible, grouping them in different kind of buckets, if you will. So the health trainings would be in one bucket, federal protections such as ADA and potentially homelessness, which is another pending training mandate for this session, would be another bucket. Looking at domestic violence and pregnant and parenting students would be one more. Mental illness and mental health and suicidal awareness would be in another bucket. But kind of maybe trying to group them a little bit more seamlessly between the myriad of trainings that are all over the school code, and also making sure that they are in one place, which is maybe just helpful for me and Brian to just kind of see them all in one spot in the school code instead of in all different places. But just trying to get that done and working closely with ISB and our partners with EdRed up in the suburbs. We've worked with the unions and other school management organizations to kind of come up with a proposal that would be still recognizing the importance of the topics of those trainings, but also making them more manageable for our folks to complete and perhaps more meaningful even too. If you're not doing it the same thing every single year, perhaps it's more meaningful if you are kind of revisiting it on maybe a longer scale. So that is our plan. We're a little bit stalled at the moment. The bill did not make it out of the House before their third reading deadline, but there were other shenanigans happening,
technical glitches
on that day. So I know Representative Mussman is seeking an extension to be able to get that out of the House and keep it moving. So we'll keep everyone posted. Yeah, well, I think first on the extending the deadline, it's worth noting the tenure bill didn't actually make it out of the Senate That's
yet,
right.
but I'm sure, well, we know that there's already been an extension of the deadline for that, so we'll have to continue to monitor that legislation. But back here on the state mandated training bill, I just want to note that this is a high priority item for the IPA board of directors, and we've obviously seen a lot of energy around this from the membership to work to make this happen, because as you've communicated about it, Allison, the replies have been pretty plentiful in people being supportive of the concept generally overall to make this happen, especially when, it raises the level of importance when you reference other trainings that are actually being proposed to put on the list this session. What are we up to? 4 or 5 new ones possibly?
At least 5 that I can think of off the top of my head. So, and we have been clear with other sponsors that, we are open to putting those trainings within that bill and making sure that they do get addressed. But, just doing it thoughtfully and making sure that we're not overlapping other trainings that currently exist, and just making sure that everything can fit together. Yeah, well, and along those lines, we'll have to watch that we don't get
20 trainings a year that they're just different than one another, and we end up with 100 total. I mean, that I don't want to get too hyperbole about, too much hyperbole about it, but that when the school code has doubled in size over the last 20 years, I think it is reasonable to have concerns with that possibility. Maybe not to that extent, but it could still be pretty significant. So we'll work to continue to stay on top of this for sure. So let's take a quick look. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I'm going to take us to the home page. I'll rely on both of you to let me know. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
All right, so we're sitting here on the home page. Allison, I'm going to let you just, as I follow the cursor here, we're going to go to the advocate drop down. There are some other buttons you can find on the home page. We have advocacy here as well. But if you go to the advocate homepage, I thought 2-3 quick places we could briefly take a look at. One would be the IPA Action Center. So people, if I click on this, where are we going to go and what are people going to see?
So that's where you're going to find our Policy and Action Center. It has various action alerts at any point in time. The ones we usually keep on there at all times is the introductions to local legislators. So it's really just a stock or a sample email that you can send to both your congressional members and your members of the state legislature, just to introduce yourself, invite them to come to your school, and for you to be a resource for them when it comes to education policy. So we'll keep that one up all the time and encourage everyone to do that. It certainly makes a difference when they're hearing from their own constituents than perhaps just the association sometimes. So it really helps if you reach out and kind of provide yourself and your contact information as a resource for them. The other two bills,
action alert.
Yeah. So this one is the tenure bill. This last one on the screen. So again, we're currently just reaching out to members of the Senate because the bill is still just in the Senate. It has been extended, so we're focusing our energy right there for now. But eventually, if it does pass the Senate, we'll be shifting over to the House and sharing the same message with House members as well.
What's nice about this, you've got a pre-populated email here where people can put in a little bit of their own information. And then you also can stay up to speed on what's going on with the legislation with email or text alerts is also correct.
Yep.
That's
right.
Great. So
Nelson,
you might need to take down.
So I know that you've stressed that we follow a lot of bills and know many legislators and talk to them on a daily basis, but it really makes a difference when their constituents, when principals, assistant principals, deans call them up and let them know what's actually happening on the ground level.
Right. And they mention it sometimes that, in a committee hearing, they'll say, well, I've heard a lot from my principals, or I've heard a lot from my superintendents or board members. So they do take notice when they get a lot of messages about the same type of topic.
So let me mention, we won't go to this page here, but people, if they're interested in finding out who their legislators are, we did have with the census, a lot of changes in districts and things. People are still curious about that, either at their school or if their home is outside of their school district, they can look that up. The other thing I wanted to show, and then we'll wrap things up here, is the bill tracker. So I'll click on that, and it's wanting me to log in, which I really don't need to do in order to get the bill tracker. The website just redirected that way. But this is an open page, so anybody can go and check it out. But what are we looking at here, Allison?
So really, I think I've got it all cleaned up as far as the bills that have not progressed much farther to this point. So this, you can scroll through, you can see all the bills that are still moving. You can see the last action that occurred. So some of these did get extensions. So you'll see Senate bills now have a House sponsor, so they're moving over to the opposite chamber. And then I provided a summary of each bill. So if you have further questions about the summary or about what the bill actually does, you can always click on the links above for the actual bill text, or you can, check out the summary and send me an email and say, I need a little bit more information on this. And then at the very top too, once we get to that next couple of weeks, as hearings get scheduled, you can click on the hearings tab and you can see, which of those bills are scheduled for a hearing that week. So of course they're on break for this week and next. So you won't see anything there at the moment, but when they get back that week of the 16th, 17th, something like that, those will start to get populated in there. So you can look it up by bill number. You can filter by the last action that occurred. So that's what we've got it filtered by right now. The introduction date, which, was back probably in, January, February, but probably the last action in the bill number is probably the easiest way to filter these legislation or legislative items. So it's really helpful. I think hopefully people are taking a look at that and can kind of see how long that list is right now, even still at the halfway point.
It's shortened up a bit, but there's still a lot going on with that. So thanks for that overview, Allison, and appreciate you bringing those tools in and continuing to shepherd those along, because that takes work staying on top of everything for sure. All right. Well, anything else here for the good of the order? We're going to wrap it up. Okay.
That's it. Stay tuned.
Cardinals. That's right. We'll go Cards, all that good stuff. Appreciate the information. Appreciate both of you and all you're doing. So my name is Jason Leahy with IPA, sharing the screen here with Brian Schwartz, Allison Maley, giving you a bit of a legislative update as we're in the spring break time of this 2023 spring legislative session. As always, if there's anything IPA can do for you, don't hesitate to give us a call or check us out on the web at ilprinciples.org. Take care.